In today's episode of the Pathway Presents podcast, I have an interesting guest here with me today. I'm with Grewal, and he's hailing over as the growth marketing manager at Codelitt. And we want to really deep dive, what Codelitt is all about. And they have an interesting tagline in the which people-driven innovation, custom software strategy, engineering, and design. So we really dive into, how they're generating great products, how they're helping teams to get great products out the door. And also, because a lot of you guys are, in sort of, an agency or growth type mindset at the very moment in your roles. Let's see how the team over at Codelitt is thinking about growth for the products. So yeah, welcome to the show, Blake.
Yes, thank you for having me on. I'm excited to get started.
Awesome. Yeah, then let's get into it. Give me a 360 overview. What is Codelitt all about in your own words?
Yeah, so you really hit on it. I mean, we enjoy helping companies create and build new things. We work on custom strategy, design, and development in our process. And we've always just been obsessed with the user journey. So ensuring products are delivering the best user experience possible, whether that be internally for the company or externally if they're selling that product to customers. But again, our design team and our user research team is very strong, and it's been great, working with companies to deliver the best possible experience.
Very good. That really brings us to the point. Maybe give me an example. What types of products you guys build? What types of company you're working with, just so we get a feel for it.
Yeah. So we've really worked with all industries, but I would say, to drill down the main few, we've been in commercial real estate, healthcare, financial services, as well as insurance, and are continuing to expand our product offerings as well. As you can imagine, and as we know, technology is continuing growing. Companies need to innovate. So we really can expand our offering in multiple industries.
Very cool. Is there typically like sort of, a certain type of person? Is there a certain role that typically knocks on Codelitt's door? Like, is that, a product manager that needs support, developing support? Or is that, like even business owners that say, hey, we need in technology here? Or, where does the urge typically come from?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And it's actually been interesting, throughout our experience thus far. We've worked with a wide range of personas. So as you can imagine, there's a innovation team at enterprises that need solutions like ours and want to work with a long-term partner like Codelitt. But we also have the solo entrepreneur that maybe has had some successful exits throughout their career. They're looking to build their next product, but they know that they're not maybe an expert in product development and they need a nice partner to do so. So we've had some cool people in that realm that we've worked with that are just constantly building different products. And on the other side of it, again, we're working with some Fortune 500 companies and Fortune 100 companies, and working with their innovation teams to scale their company. And what I've noticed, throughout time, especially the last few years, that innovation team is really becoming a department that's growing at multiple organizations. Prior to Codelitt, I was in the fintech space. And realized that credit unions, for example, in the financial services industry, were really increasing their chief digital officers as well as chief innovation officers as they were looking to really compete with those neobanks that have come on very strong.
Yep, that makes a whole lot of sense. You described a couple of different sort of types of people that getting started with Codelitt. Maybe tell me a little bit about their journey. Like, how do they typically hear about you guys getting started? Maybe, or in other words, sort of the client acquisition channels that you guys leverage.
Yeah, that's another interesting question as well. Codelitt has had an awesome opportunity the past 3 to 4 years and some great success so far, which has allowed us to expand our team. So at first, we really started out as more of a outbound oriented organization. We still have folks coming to our site and reaching out to us, but it was really referral based, whether it be within that organization, working with different departments, or just outbound hearing from our sales team. Now, as we expand our growth, we've opened up our growth marketing channels, hence why I was brought onto the team. And ultimately now taking advantage of various channels, posting content on our blog, as well as on social media. I would say the two social media sites that we're really utilizing right now are Twitter and LinkedIn. And then eventually we're going to expand into webinars and events. And again, continue just making sure the customer is informed, when they come to the site, and make sure we're nurturing them along the journey. But also not being annoying with too many pop-ups or call to actions, et cetera. So I think that can also get in the way of the journey as well. So there's definitely a nice balance to strike with that. But what I've found in my career is that people love being informed by topics they're interested in. So ultimately, having that collaboration with sales and marketing has been a huge focus with us at Codelitt.
Makes a lot of sense. You spoke a bit about the website and the experience on the page. how do you think about the website? Like, what role does the website play in your perspective in their journey?
Yeah, I think the website plays a massive role, right? Because when people come to that website, it's ultimately your chance to get their attention and to learn about the Codelitt brand. I posted something on our Twitter and LinkedIn, I believe it was last week, talking about the human attention span and how it's just constantly decreasing. And I know personally mine is as well. So ultimately, when someone lands on that first page, we need to make sure that they're understanding what Codelitt does. And the interesting part about Codelitt is not only are we a software development firm that's developing custom solutions, we've also taken the chance throughout our growth to open up our joint ventures arm. So we also have a portfolio of companies that we're continuing to expand and grow on, which has been interesting, as well as it allows us to expand into new markets. So there may be a startup or early stage company that's coming to our site and may not necessarily have the resources to go down the custom development route, but they may offer an interesting opportunity for us to work with them more on the joint venture side. So it's really important, and as we continue growing, to ensure that wording and positioning is being spoken to on the site.
Interesting. I'm curious because typically the marketers that I have on the show, they are quite critical with their website. It specifically plays a critical role. How do you think about this? Like, what is sort of typical, let's say, some strength of the website versus where do you see room for improvement, or where do you see sort of the website developing towards now you being in the team?
I think there's always ways to grow, as well as be more creative and ultimately ensure that we're giving off the best possible wording, for our Codelitt brand. One of the initiatives that we've kicked off early on when I was onboarded was ultimately just seeing how people interact with the site. So using heat maps, seeing where people are clicking. That was a big priority for me because I ultimately wanted to make sure that people were going to all the pages on the site, for example. I think some websites have a ton of content out there, but what they may realize is that it's not necessarily getting looked at. And as you know as well, website performance and speed is vital in Google's search engine too. So you have to make sure that you're not overloading users with content, et cetera. So I'm in the same boat. I think it's important to be critical on the site and make sure that it's ultimately giving off the best possible positioning when people are joining it. And again, it's constantly evolving and updating, as we find customer feedback and as we find that user experience is changing.
You mentioned heat maps there. Is there sort of anything that you've picked up over the years in your marketing career that was helpful, like helpful tools, methodologies, maybe approaches that help to figure out why people do or do not convert, and then to sort of counteract?
Yeah. So right now I'm using a tool called Lucky Orange. And it's actually proven to be pretty well, especially because they have a free version and everyone loves free things. So taking advantage of the free version and ultimately plan on continuing to use it. But, I think the interesting part about, the heat map journey that I've had is at first just looking at the main page of the site, how far are people really scrolling down? And what I've found is that, companies that I've worked at, we've had some really, one of our top content pieces and interesting pieces at the bottom of the site. And then you realize, man, only 25% of the users that are coming to the site are actually looking at that, right? And maybe that's part of your site where you have that positioning and branding that you want people to see, but they're not even getting there. So that's been important to me, and especially with the attention span piece, making sure that we have the relevant information at the point of the site where people are scrolling to, or at least the majority of the people. And again, I think also looking at where folks are clicking on the site has proved to be very important as well. For example, I've had initiatives and projects that I've done where I realize we have a resources or blog page and majority of the users are not clicking on there. Maybe they're clicking on the About Us page over that. So it's really interesting. And I recommend that to a lot of marketers and companies out there in general, just to understand how are people, viewing our site, because we all have our own biases as marketers. We think, well, people are going to love this, right? But ultimately, if you look at the data and heat maps and where people are clicking, it gives you that insight on the other side.
Actually, maybe one quick follow-up, because it's quite interesting, and the heat maps have been in conversation on some podcasts prior. Like, how do you sort of go with and figuring out what to change on the website? Because there's a lot of insights, a lot of data, as you were describing. What's your way of dealing with this? Maybe even hundreds of session recordings and the like.
Yeah, so I would say, through multiple experiments that I've run in my life and the multiple failures that have come out of that, I've really learned to start small and then scale from there. So, why I brought up initially the main page is because that's the big thing where people are typically coming to, right? That's typically the starting point for that user journey. Unless people are finding your blogs, et cetera, and getting to a different page, it's typically the main page that people are coming to. So I've always drilled down and focused on just the main page initially, and then scaled from there. But my biggest recommendation would really be starting small with the data, because it can be overwhelming. And especially if you're at a small company or startup and you're the one person on the growth team that's looking at all this, you don't want to be overwhelmed and think too much into the data, in the sense where, oh my God, I need to look at all these other pages and see how people are viewing them, et cetera. I've always made sure to optimize that first page experience, and then drag the user from there and see how they're interacting with the website.
That makes a whole lot of sense. Cool. Yeah, let's switch gears a little bit. That was quite interesting. Sort of a little excursion into sort of dealing with a lot of website data with a lot of marketers. I think, to be honest, a lot of marketers on the show that at some point they stop even looking because it's overwhelming. So it's great that you point that out. So I'm curious, right? But while speaking about a lot of information, there is a lot of information out there on for marketers, growth marketers, a lot of blogs, podcasts, communities, and the likes. Like, where do you go? How do you keep on educating yourself with all the noise out there?
Yeah, I think, and that's an interesting question as well. There is a ton of podcasts out there that I've taken advantage of. One that I've actually started listening to early on in my career, because I started on the venture capital side, was 20 VC by Harry Stebbins. He's got it on Spotify. I think he's all over. But he also came out with a 20 VC growth, which has been super interesting to listen to. Really has taught me, just the little experiments that people have run that have resulted in, big initiatives and big findings. It's super interesting. And just to hear how people started out as well. Another, series that I've read is Growth Hacking. So there's a book out that I highly recommend. Talks again about different company, experiences with the various experiments. Airbnb is one in there that's super interesting on how they grew and scaled. And then additionally, Growth Hacking as a community that I've taken advantage of, and just meeting with different people, looking at different blogs on there as well. And then lastly, I will say Twitter has been a massive resource. A ton of different people on Twitter, a lot of different opinions. And that's been a good opportunity for me to just learn about various experiments that folks are doing, et cetera. And I think, one thing that I've learned as well is every company is going to have a different path to growth. So what's worked for someone is not necessarily going to work for you. So I think also bringing that full circle, it's important to be open-minded in running experiments, right? And not necessarily drilling down on so-and-so did this at this successful company, so it's got to work for me, right?
It's actually quite interesting that bringing it into the right context, that has also been, there's a lot of learnings, but you have to adapt it very much to the context that you're in. That has been a theme and a lot of conversations on the blog. Very good. Yeah, I have some rapid fire questions for you to wrap it up for today. Are you ready for those?
Let's do it.
What's the last book you read or the last podcast you listened to?
Last book that I read, it's actually Monetizing Innovation. I have it right here. Let's see who it's by. Monetizing Innovation. I'm going to butcher the author's name, but it's right here. It talks about designing products around your price and design, and ultimately going to market. And then before that, I read a growth hacking book as well. So those are the last two that I've read.
What's one single thing your company is focused on the most at the moment?
Say at the moment, we're currently focused on delivering the best possible experiences, product experiences for our clients. So why I say that is because, our user research and user experience team has been consistently growing, as well as on our development side, and we're hiring. So always, if someone is listening to this podcast and knows someone that would be a good fit, we'd love to talk with them. And as our company is growing, we've had some awesome opportunities to reach globally and hire global talent. So it's been very exciting.
If there would be no boundaries in tech, right? Everything possible. What's the one thing you would fix for your role today?
No boundaries in tech. I would say, when working with the sales team and also collaborating in marketing efforts, we've been working on various workflows and automation. I think continuing to innovate on the automation side and making things very seamless and easy for, multiple departments to collaborate and communicate on as we continue to grow and scale.
What's the last thing that kept you awake at night about the company?
Continuing to grow it, right? I think it's always interesting, thinking about different ways to implement, growth experiments and analyzing what data we're getting. And again, just thinking on different ideas to really, continue to innovate and grow.
Very cool. And for the last question, I want to do a little bit of time travel, right? Let's go back to the days of Detroit Mercy or Michigan State, right? So you're getting out of, undergrad education and heading off into the world of business. What's the one advice you would give yourself for your journey?
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, my big piece of advice would be to be more bold. Not be afraid to run various experiments. The interesting part about my journey so far is it's been at smaller teams. So I've typically been the youngest or, the first initial hire at a department. And ultimately, I would just tell myself to not be afraid to, fail, right? Not be afraid to run various experiments. Because as we talked about earlier in this conversation, people have gained so much exposure and growth from the smallest of experiments. So you really never know what's going to work. So again, my biggest piece of advice would just to be more bold and get out there and do it.
I really appreciate you took the time with us today to be a guest on Pathmark Presents. I want to give you the last word. If somebody would be forgetting all that we discussed about Codelitt, what's the one thing they should remember?
Yeah, I think, for Codelitt, I really want to nail down the fact that we're just very focused on delivering the best possible product experiences, for companies. Again, we're growing our design and development team at a rapid pace, and we just have some very strong people globally. And we're focused on building products that users love. And as we know, customer retention is massive for company growth, and users are just looking for the best possible experience when working with companies. So that's what we're focused on.
Thanks a lot for being a guest on Pathmark Presents.
Thank you.